You are live on Channel 8 and YouTube.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The time is 6:30 p.m. and I call this meeting of the Templeton Advisory Committee to order. Would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. But I ask you to please remain standing and observe a moment of silence at this time in honor of all those who have given their lives in the defense of our country and our freedom, as we just passed Memorial Day on this past Monday, May 31st. Thank you. All right. The first item on the agenda this evening is the approval of the meeting minutes from the meeting on May 27th. At this time, I'll accept a motion to table that until June 17th, as they are not prepared at this time.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Do I have any discussion on said motion? Hearing no discussion, roll call vote. Bob?
Yes.
Will?
Yes.
April?
Yes.
Bev?
Yes.
Faith?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, if you could
Mr. Spring.
go back to item 4, correspondence about our newest member.
Yep, I'm going to do that next.
Okay, thank you.
We did receive one piece of correspondence this past week, and that was from the town moderator in the appointment of Ms. April Cover to the advisory committee. And April, I am assuming that you were sworn in this week at town hall as well?
Yes.
So at this point, I would like to welcome you to the Templeton Advisory Committee and thank you for volunteering your time and your knowledge to help us out. If you'd like, I'll give you a couple minutes to give a little bit of background on yourself, and then we will continue.
Thank you all very much for having me. I am a real estate agent here in town. I've lived in town for 16 years with my family and my children. I have a background in banking and auditing. And I'm looking forward to working with you all.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome, April.
Thanks.
All right. Right. So now we have the correspondence. I believe the next item on the agenda, if I remember correctly, is discussion. You just give me a second. I'm going to go to the Templeton Advisory. I'm going to go to the YouTube feed and actually check it because I know that. Hang on. If I go to the YouTube feed, I know it's on there. Okay. Yes, discussion. So we had 3 items on the board for discussion this evening. And by the way, none of these require motions or anything like that. These are literally just discussion items. And these 3 items are going to lead into our first item of new business, which is the Emergency Reserve Fund request for veterans benefits. So we're going to review quickly Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 6, Towns Reserve Funds for Extraordinary Expenditures establishment. We're going to review the Finance Committee Handbook, Chapter 3, page 20, Reserve Fund Transfers. And we're going to review the Town of Templeton Advisory Committee policy on reserved fund transfers. And for this discussion, I am going to defer to the senior member, Mr. Wil Spring.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. See what happens when you end up telling the chairman that we should have some discussion on some stuff leading up to the emergency reserve thing. The reason I brought these forward, just to lead into it, was that it was brought up at the last meeting about roles and responsibilities, and there are a number of communities that you can end up going to, like Provincetown, Stowe, Wellesley, who have books on this, and that's something we can discuss later on. But I thought this was the opportune time to take and end up, since we have an emergency reserve transfer, to take and talk about things about the emergency reserve. So the first thing I want to take and end up doing is the Mass General Law 40, Section 6. And I'm just going to end up hitting some highlights. It's to provide extraordinary and unforeseen expenses that we can end up as advisory committee reviewing and allowing those to happen. The appropriation for the emergency reserve ends up happening either a town meeting or a special town meeting, and it cannot exceed the 5% of the levy of the previous year. This year here, we have 45,000 as far as what's on the books. We asked for more. Some other communities will end up being anywhere from 75 to 150, 200,000, but it depends on what is put in the budget. And there is in the selectmen's thing limiting us to I think 0.75%. Isn't that right, Bob? As I recall.
Yes.
But we think that's limiting it per se. So there is all of that, and it since we are the finance or advisory committee, we're the ones that disperse it. As you can see in the law, it can end up also being done by the selectmen if there is no committee, appropriate committee such as ours. And by the way, there is many names that the advisory committee goes by. It goes by finance committee, which basically in some communities, that's all they look at. Advisory is all encompassing of the warrant articles as well as finance, etc. And some communities have the warrant advisory and warrant committee, which looks at the finances and warrant. So so the newer members, if you see that type of things out there, that's us. And I'm going to take and end up right now is saying, okay, if there's any questions, I don't have I'll tell you right now, I've been on for quite a while, and it took a while for me to take and end up learning this also, and I just passing this information on. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer.
Can I say something?
Of course, Bev, go ahead.
The reserve fund is the only fund that the advisory board has that actually touches money. We don't touch it. All we do is we approve the transfer. The advisory board never touches a penny.
Mm-hmm.
We even just so I can, there's no way that we end up we approve the transfer of money, but we don't end up actually handling the money per se. We have to give documentation to the accountant, who will end up transferring from the emergency reserve to whichever department is asking for the transfer.
So in the past few years, the reserve fund hasn't been used correctly. It's not
been used at all.
It's not supposed to be a savings plan for free cash.
Right.
If the fire truck breaks down and there is no funds available in their budget to fix it, then they come to the reserve fund to get bailed out.
Yep.
That is what that's supposed to be for. And it can be for a number of things, but it's above and beyond. I remember the day that Wil got on the advisory board many years ago. We have never used the reserve fund for payroll, because most boards pretty much figure on what they need for funds. And it was a instance where the advisory board didn't really know what they were doing, and they were going to approve more funds for a person that worked for the town. it's always used more or less for an emergency and unforeseen circumstances. Basically, that's it.
Just to give you some background, I have some figures that the emergency reserve handed out from 2012 up until 2018, anywhere from $2,000 to $49,000, depending on how much money was in the budget.
Mhm.
Since 18, the administration has seen that they don't want to take and end up coming to the advisory committee, and with the change and the administrator, he has now chosen to do that. We can get into that a little bit more later on.
Which is correct. That's
Yeah.
the way it should be done.
And I just let you guys know that we have in the live chat, Michael Curry. He
Oh.
wanted to welcome the new members and welcome back the old members as well.
Mhm.
Thank you, Michael. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding the use of the advisory committee, the emergency reserve fund? And at this point, if you have those questions, please direct them to Will or to Bev or to Bob, as they are the senior members of the committee and have the experience with it. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding the use of the reserve fund?
Mr. Chair, if I might,
Yes, Mr. Spring. Go ahead, Bob.
I'd just like to add that it would be nice with the transfers if we got to a place where they all came in the same form or fashion to the advisory committee also.
Mhm.
I think that's a goal of Adam's, from talking to him in the past, is to gain more consistency.
Mhm.
But I think that the advisory committee needs to promote that with vigor.
Just to go along with what Bob says, besides, we have a form that has to be submitted. It has to be filled out. It's done in triplicate for a reason, because now the requester gets a copy. Once it's gone through, whether it's approved or denied, the accountant gets one to take and make the necessary changes if they're so approved, and once for the advisory committee that they can end up having for their records, so that when they end up doing the annual report, they have a record of that, so they can end up reporting transfers, as regular end of year transfers, as well as from the emergency reserve. And you're absolutely right, Bob.
Any other questions, comments about how the emergency reserve fund should be used? Everyone's clear, and the other thing is the documentation that was given to you in the package for today's meeting. It has the chapter in the Finance Committee Handbook, which can be found on the Templeton website. It has the chapter from the Mass General Laws, and it also has the Town of Templeton Advisory Committee policy on reserve fund transfers, which can also be found on the website. So please, review those, and if you have any questions on anything, you're more than welcome to. I assume you're more than welcome to let Bev or Will or Bob know, and we can certainly clarify those.
Just to take it end up going on, you mentioned about from the Finance Committee Handbook put out by Association Town Finances. Yep. Unfortunately, in 2017, I was chairman, and I ended up having health issues. I was gone out for over 3 months, and that passed on to the vice chair. And those members attended the annual meeting, and they ended up getting the newest copy, which was done in October of 2017. And there's issues with things that are on the web page for the advisory committee that needs to be straightened out, per se. But that in time we'll probably be taking care of that. The other thing I wanted to point out within the book, it pretty well spells out the same thing that we just went through the law. But the key thing here is the Finance Committee should adopt their own reserve fund guidelines, which is the policy which we will talk about next, Mr. Chairman, if you want.
Yep, please. The Town of Templeton Advisory Committee Policy on Reserve Fund Transfers. Please go ahead, Will.
This was instituted in 2016. There is a number of other policies that from 13 to 16 were presented and adopted by the advisory committee. This particular one, I don't know if you want, how deep you want me to go into it, Mr. Chairman, but it basically says about it, the request for a transfer from the fund is you have to look at about unexpected and unanticipated and unforeseen as far as the spending. So in the case of, and it also spends out that, excuse me, it also points out that the committee cannot end up overriding town meeting. So if the town meeting were to cut a budget and people were to ask for money, we cannot give monies from the emergency reserve. The other thing is a key point, which I ran into when I first got on in 2012, is that it cannot be used for salaries. We had in 2012, and that's a story by itself, but there was a couple requests for it, and they were denied twice by the advisory committee, and it was backed up by the DOR and DLS. They gave us the foresight that said you should not end up spending it, having emergency reserve for salaries per se. The other things on here, let me get my glasses, it's small print here. Our chairman is wearing glasses, so I have two pairs of glasses, one for the computer and one to read up close.
Your chairman is as blind as a bat on any good day of the week, so that's the.
Hey, come join the thing. So let me just let's see. We actually asked for a representative of whoever the body is that they can come, and I see our VSO is here, that they can end up talking to any questions and talking about that. We asked that if it's possible to take and end up using any monies within the fund before try to deplete that before you ask for a request. The emergency reserve can actually be used from the first day of the new year all the way up until July 15th, which is the last day that when any transfers can happen, because that's when the accountant closes the books. And if somebody keeps coming back year after year, then that's a clear sign of budgetary issues. This is all spelled out in the policy, and it's been transmitted a number of times to the administration over the years, but it is not up on our town website. The input forms for requesting it are there, but not necessarily the policy. We can't end up going more appropriation for anything that was deficit spending or whatever. The department should never incur expenses in excess of appropriation, anticipating approval for the reserve fund. I mean, that's pretty well spells out for that. There is a Mass General law that covers up. I just ran into that. I ran into that with seeking some information above and beyond from other communities about that. The town of Worthington had a nice reserve fund transfer memo, and they basically spelled out the Mass General laws about using funds, and there's also a Mass General law that covers you can't have a deficit.
Basically, we don't make stuff up as we go along.
No.
There are policies, and I was on the advisory board for a long time before I knew any of this. Back in the day, things were a whole lot more casual than they are today. And
well, just to look at this.
That's why we're doing this, so that all of you understand and the people in the audience understand too.
And I greatly appreciate the fact that we're doing this. And I think that it's very important that as a committee get to new things that we haven't seen before, that we do this, especially considering we're talking about basically 4 new members on this committee. I think it's very important that whenever we have to do something that the 4 new members haven't seen before, that we go through a discussion of what governs it, and that we understand what we're supposed to be doing before we do it. So, thank you, Will, and the senior members for bringing this up, and please continue to do so as we come up with new things. Will, go ahead.
Yeah, as you can see, Mr. Chairman, it took us a couple of years to end up actually formulating this particular policy, and believe me, and that you got to understand that it wasn't just formulated by members here per se. One of the key things, and hang on a second.
Well, you get lost.
The key thing here is, and if you go to the Association of Town Finance annual meeting, you will hear members of the advisory committee, the hierarchy, the officers actually say this is, don't end up trying to take and create something. Plagiarize. All these documents have been out there. We pull this from a number of other communities, and we developed our own per se that we felt comfortable about presenting to the community as taking care of the end of the year transfer.
Yep. So I think now we can do the transfer.
Is there any further discussion on the 3 discussion items that we presented for, which are all with regards to the emergency transfer fund?
And just one other thing is that from the handbook, it was done from the 2017 handbook. It wasn't from the 10, because you had that on the thing, and I it was my fault that I didn't tell you that it was updated, and I know you looked at that when I present that forward.
All right.
Thank you, Will.
So the last handbook, is it 2016 or 2017?
2017. And just to end up adding a little more information, I have talked to Denise Baker, who is the administrative person in MMA for Association Town Finances. She was reluctant to have us put any of this on, and I said, well, listen, all the communities have the handbook on their site. Some of them have 10 like we do, some have 17. She says, well, the reason I try to take and discourage that is that some communities do not pay their dues, and then they have the handbook for nothing. And I went, well, even if we put it on, there's a whole bunch of other communities. And she also indicated that there is in the works for changes to the handbook. I think they're minor ones that will come out later this year, and probably right after the annual meeting for Association Town Finance. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was nodding my head. That's all.
Now, will those changes go through us?
No, they have a committee from the association that the changes. Now, if you so wish, and you want to become an officer at the annual town meeting, you can put your name in, and then you can get on, or you can get on the committee to take and end up redoing the handbook, or send something to the people on that committee to take and end up upgrading if you see that you want changes. I mean, this is just like Mass General Law. Yeah, if you and I mean, we have some people that are senior people on there. Mr. Tossi, who is the chairman of the advisory committee in Arlington, has been chairman for over 25 years for that committee. So he has a lot of knowledge on his committee, as well as all within the state of Massachusetts. Does that answer your question, April?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
That is a very, very interesting meeting to go to. I think if you get a chance to go, we went all together the last time I went. It was really worth doing. You'd be very impressed.
There is monies in the budget for paying for that particular meeting.
I think I paid my own way last time. I think a bunch of us did.
I know some people have, and others I encouraged, in, since we have the money, that they should end up putting it in since the money is there.
Yeah, okay. Rolling
Any
right
other
on.
questions or comments on the three discussion items? Just to make everything official, I will entertain a motion to end discussion and move on to new business.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we'll go to a roll call vote. Bob?
Yes.
Will?
Yes.
April?
Yes.
Faith?
Yes.
Bev?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Motion carries unanimously at 6:56 p.m. Moving to new business. Dated May 26th, 2021, we have an emergency reserve fund request from Veterans Benefits. I'll entertain a motion to approve the emergency reserve fund transfer request from for Veterans Benefits in the amount of $4,474. And I'm sorry, I apologize, wrong number. The transfer is actually in the amount of $3,000.00.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, instead of having a motion to give the money, this is the appropriate time to ask any questions of the VSO.
I was going to do that in discussion of the motion. And
okay. All right. Maybe.
If technically by Robert's rules, you do that in the discussion of the motion, and then if the committee chooses to vote it, if the committee chooses not to approve it, it would be no votes. So let's so we'll do it the way Robert's rules stated. Do I have a motion to approve the request for transfer from the emergency reserve fund in the amount of $3,000 for veterans benefits?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved by Bev Bartolomeo and seconded by Mr. Bob May. At this time, I will recognize Sheila Pelletier of Veterans Benefits to discuss the reasoning for the Emergency Reserve Fund request. Sheila, floor is yours.
Thank you. So as some of you know, and some of you are about to know, the Chapter 115, which is what we're asking the extra $3,000 for, is regarding veterans and their dependents that come into the town office with financial insecurities. And this year we had a few more people added to the roll, which brought the amount up, requesting the additional $3,000 to clear us for the month of June. There's no scientific way to predict what we're going to be able to spend each year or not spend, but we are required by law to accept their applications, and if they are approved, then we have to pay them. So some of these things do happen where we don't have enough money in the original budget.
Sheila, do you know offhand how many additional applications you received that were approved this year? Just out of curiosity.
We received 3. One was held for just 1 month, and the other 2 are long-term.
Okay. I will open it up to the committee members. If you have any questions, now would be the time. Please use the raise hand function in Zoom if you would like to ask a question, just so we can have some order to it. Bob, you're first. Go ahead.
Hi, Sheila. Bob May here. I just had a question regarding the amount being requested. I believe, and I don't have it up in front of me right now, but I believe I looked at the last 2 or 3 BBAs and thought I noticed roughly $8,000 being spent last year or last month. And just wondering if you think this month is actually going to be apparently lighter. You know, because I mean, I'm personally, you know, I have no concern for this, because either, you know, if we transfer it into the account and you spend it, great. If you don't spend it, it goes to free cash. If we don't spend it, it goes to free cash. And if I'm not mistaken, Sheila, could you please correct me if I am, but do we not get reimbursed for some of these funds also?
We get reimbursed 75% of what I spend.
Yes, that's what I thought. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I just the question on the dollars, do you think you're reasonably sure this will be enough to get you through?
Yes, right now I'm targeting about 6,500 for June, which is the closing of the year. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
You may, Mr. Spring, go right ahead.
Sheila, I just have a question here, and maybe you can end up answering it. Last year, because we had a different administrator, this came as an end-of-year transfer, which was for more than the 3,000, and you were I know you were requesting 5,000, and I was in full support of that, because I knew that the monies would end up being used for veterans, and you had whatever request that you had to be spent or for the veterans per se. But I'm just wondering if you knew why it was done there was last year versus the way it's done this year, if you had any insight to that.
Will, I'm sorry, I got a call halfway through that, but I think I understand the question to be is why did the funding go the way it did last year as opposed to this year?
Yes, thank you.
So last year was a bit of pulling and from different funds, and I had talked to Carter, and that's how we felt best to go about it, to request the money that I needed for last year.
By Carter, you mean Carter Terrazzini, the previous town administrator?
That's correct, Matthew.
Thank you.
Because this could have gone through the end of the year transfers too, because there's extra money in accounts, and I have nothing against using the emergency reserve, because that's just another avenue. But it just the method is a little bit different than what has been used in the past, and I'm all for using the emergency reserve for the when it's done in this particular manner, when it's unforeseen and unbudgeted.
Right. And my other accounts, one of them is supplies, and I am buying the lights to eliminate some of the flags within the town in my supply budget, because I have extra this year. So I don't have any extra in my supplies. I have some extra in one of my other accounts, and if needed, I could transfer that over. But normally, I don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, so I was kind of keeping that on the side as an option. But I think that the money that I'm asking for here, the 7,500, should cover me through the rest of the month.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Bev, you're next.
Do you feel that you have enough money in your budget? What I would like to see is a true budget in May, so that we don't have to backfill. I never heard the term backfill in my life. I don't ever want to hear it again, because I don't like doing business that way. Do you think that your budget for the coming year is going to be adequate?
Well, Adam and I had spoken, and there's an extra $2,500 over what was last year. So that's $500 less than what I'm asking for this year. So again, I do have some pretty complex tools out there that go back to the time that we started as VSOs. I think it's 2014. And every year I update that on what we spent, what we got reimbursed. I average that out, and then I take last year's, I average that out. And that's what I asked for in my budget. And then the town administrator and I speak, and we kind of come into the middle of that. So I do believe that we're with the extra 2,500. If it's like this last year, we should be able to make it, but I can't foretell deaths or anybody.
Yeah, there's a lot. Your kind of work, it's too vague. But just the same, I would just as soon have people up front tell me this is what I need than to lowball town meeting in May and then have us, because then you don't have a real budget. That's what I would like to see, is a real budget.
I agree with you. And if you look at what I request.
I understand where you're coming from. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Yeah. I really try to do my best to ask what I project I'm going to need.
It's kind of like dealing with different people. It's difficult because everybody does business in a different way.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I was dealing with widgets that I'm going to buy 100 widgets and know I'm going to buy 100, but unfortunately.
The widgets move.
Yeah.
They get old, they get sick.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
They do.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, one final question.
Yes, of course, Will. Go ahead.
You're only requesting 3,000. I just want to make sure that that's adequate. I'm not opposed of actually upping that number if the other members want to end up doing that. I know that in doing some paperwork, I have worked with this VSO, and I got resolution that I was not able to get from the previous VSOs. So I fully support what she's doing here. And for the veterans, if people don't know, she has ended up instituting the Veterans for Food process in the community out of the American Legion, and that I cannot applaud her and the other volunteers enough, because that was really needed, especially during this year of the pandemic. And I'd like to end up making a motion, Mr. Chairman, if she doesn't need more money. Sheila, you need more money? Okay,
I do not.
I'll make a motion to
actually wait, Will. I'll actually there is actually already a motion on the floor to approve the request for transfer from the Emergency Reserve Fund as stated. And Sheila, if you're sure you don't need any more money now, if you do, let us know now, because we can amend.
No, that's all I need is 3,000.
Okay. In that case, I'm going to ask if there's any other discussion regarding the motion to approve the request for transfer from emergency fund to veterans benefits in the amount of $3,000 as currently listed.
So moved.
Is there any other discussion? Don't forget, we already have a motion. We already have a motion on the floor, duly seconded. Okay. Hearing no further discussion, I move to a roll call vote. Remember, a yes vote is to approve the request for transfer from the Emergency Reserve Fund listed in the amount of $3,000 as presented for veterans benefits. Mr. Bob, go ahead. Your vote.
Yes.
Will.
Yes.
April.
Yes.
Faith.
Yes.
Bev.
Yes.
And I am a yes. The motion carries unanimously at 7:08 p.m. Sheila, I have the 3 copies. I will sign those and date them, and I will have them in the Dropbox at Town Hall first thing in the morning.
All right. Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you very much. Go ahead,
Mr.
Will.
Chairman, just on procedures, the meeting date should be on the board, as you can see, and the members present and voted. And also there's a amount for the transfer, and any comments that you wish to put in there.
Yep.
And as I said, the 3 copies where they go.
Yep, I have all that. I will fill all that in upon signing and dating, and it's not going to be too difficult, because it's pretty much it's everything that's listed here. So, but like I said, I will make sure that is in the town. I will make sure that is in the Dropbox first thing in the morning for you, Sheila.
Thank you so much. You have a great day.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your coming.
Thank you,
All right.
Sheila.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep.
Bye now.
Moving to the next item in new business, communication from Faith Curcio on May 31st, 2021. regarding advisory committee meeting frequency for fiscal year 2022. I am going to recommend we table this to our next meeting on the 17th, as that would fall underneath the reorganization for fiscal year 2022, and I'll entertain said motion at this time.
That sounds like a plan.
So moved.
I have a
Second.
motion to it. I have a motion and a second to table advisory committee meeting frequency for fiscal year 2022 until the meeting on June 17th, 2021, our reorganization meeting. Is there any discussion on the motion? Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, we go to a roll call vote. Bob?
Yes.
Will?
Yes.
April?
Yes.
Bev?
Yes.
Faith?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Motion passes unanimously at 7:10 p.m. Okay. Very quickly, to make everything official, I'll entertain a motion to move to members' comments.
So moved.
Do I have a second? I have a
Second.
motion. I have a motion and a second to move to the members' comments portion of the agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we move to a vote. Bob?
Yes.
Will?
Yes.
April?
Yes.
Faith?
Yes.
Bev?
Yes.
And I am a yes. That motion carries at 7:11 p.m. Members' comments. I'm going to go last, as I have a couple things that I want to make comment on at the end. Tonight, I'd like to start with our new member, April. April, go ahead. If you have anything you'd like to say at this point, please do.
I don't have anything necessarily at this point.
Okay. Very well. Thank you and welcome. We appreciate your donating your time to the advisory committee, and we look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Faith, would you like to go next?
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Bev?
I think this was a very good meeting and I hope it was educational. I think it's important for people to understand that there is a process that we have to follow, and that every board in this town needs to follow the rules and regulations like everybody else. So I'm looking forward to this coming session. Thank you.
Thank you, Bev. And once again, I do appreciate Will bringing forward the background on the Emergency Reserve Fund and how it's supposed to be used. And like I said, as we as a group see these new things that we haven't dealt with before, I encourage the senior members to continue to do this so that we understand and are doing things correctly, and we're not just doing things that are by the seat of our pants, and we are actually we're understanding what we're trying to do here. So thank you. Bob.
I was going to try and hold off here, but the only thing I do want to say, and it is regarding the transfers and the reserve fund. You know, I fully support the VSO coming tonight before us, and she came. Her paperwork was all filled out. She presented her case. She was firm about her money. You know, she seemed to come prepared. It was nice to see, and I'd like to see more of it. The thing that I wanted to kind of just pass on to some of the new members is the reserve fund. Will hit on it earlier, but the reserve fund can be up to 5% of the town's budget, which, you know, numbers back and forth, but let's just call it $500,000 is what it could be. And it's just a different method of budgeting. Our administration at present chooses to carry the excess cash that is designed to go into the reserve fund in just an overage amongst the department accounts. They carry about the same amount of money. It just doesn't require them going to the advisory committee for approval on, going into the reserve. But the problem with this, as you can see just tonight, is all of you, or I won't say all of you because some of you are new members, but the senior members know, and some of the new members do, that the financial management policy for Templeton requires us to carry, 5% overage for free cash. So Sheila came to us tonight and came to the reserve, utilized the process for sure, but there was absolutely no real reason for it to happen because the money is in the accounts. There's excess money within the overall budget, just slush. And I'd like to see that disappear. I'd like to see our administration tighten their belt. I'd like to see our capital get on the front side of the budget rather than the back side of the budget. And our free cash, as it's known now, to be placed in reserve up front, rather than using next year's money for your capital and always playing safe. I'd rather be a little bit more proactive. And that's my 2 cents.
And I think that's
Thank
a
you.
conversation we can have with the town administrator. For obviously the boat's gone for fiscal year 2022 because that got approved at annual town meeting a few weeks ago. But it's certainly a discussion we can have with Adam Lamontagne for fiscal year 2023. Maybe it doesn't happen all at once. Maybe it's a gradual process and they give a little bit more each year into the reserve fund rather than keeping it as slush in the budget. But it's certainly a conversation we can have and see if we can start to make some change in that respect.
Yeah, and that's what it needs to be, is a conversation, because it isn't just a do, it's a process.
Yep, absolutely,
Exactly.
I agree.
Very good. Thank you.
I agree.
Yes, Bev?
I agree with them 100% because there's things that we need to do in this town. The roads are a disaster. So instead of having all that money in free cash, we could take a chunk of it and put it toward fixing the road.
Yep, I absolutely agree. That's something that could be done.
We have someone else in the chat who just commented.
Yeah.
Timothy Toth said, I guess you all missed the VSO informing you that there were more requests for assistance than anticipated.
No, we did get that there were more requests than anticipated. So, yeah. Will, I think you're last.
I'll just have to add to what Bob says.
Mm-hmm.
The budget has, as the DOR DLS indicated, the last 3 years or so, 4 years, the actual amount above, because you can't count before the actual policy went into effect. They actually normalized it out from, I think, 2014 or so. They added extra years, so it only came out to like 7.95%. But over the time that the policy went into effect, it went from 14 to 17% as far as the free cash was. That's way too much. Other communities, the approach that they have is that they tighten up the budget for all the budgets and not have as much excess money in each department, and they put it in the emergency reserve. So that makes the department heads try to take and end up working to maintain the budget, and they're not spending money without any regards. And the reason I say this is when I first got on, and this is a true story, in 2012, a department came to us for emergency reserve money. And you know what they came for? They came for a coffee pot, folks. I nearly died when I heard that they came for a coffee pot and they thought that was something that the emergency reserve should pick up. It just blew my mind. So these type of things, they should have ended up working some other different methods for that. But I mean, it's really imperative that if you look at all the other communities, and I mean, I do a lot of research and I do a lot of stuff on looking at other communities. They have tighter budgets than we do. They put money, a little more money into the emergency reserve. So when it's still needed, it's there. So that if the request is there, and if it's not budgeted and it's not anticipated, I mean, if it's not budgeted, they come to the emergency reserve, get the money. This is not withholding stuff. If they end up having an expense that they can't foresee and they've got a little tighter budget, the money's there. That's what it's for. We had in past years when I was on, for like the fire department, they had the ladder truck that the pump was gone. It started out when it was first requested by the then chief of $25,000 or $26,000, and we kind of pushed back because we really didn't have that amount of money, a lot of money in emergency reserve, and we were anticipated if there was something else. What it finally ended up was between $16,000 and $17,000. He figured a way to end up actually getting the pump in and getting the job done, which was beneficial to them. The job got done, and it's also beneficial that there was extra money for any other request. My only other comment for this evening is that the process that we had tonight with the emergency reserve was one of the better ones that I've been on for quite a while, as to a department head coming to us, asking for the money, being prepared, being able to take and talk to it, and us moving through it quite quickly without end up asking a lot of questions. I mean, sometimes we had department heads that actually gave documentation above and beyond the document. And there is other stuff that we need in the future to hit on and make better for this committee going forward. It's the whole budgeting process and our recommendation, as well as roles and responsibility documents I talked about earlier. Those are things, and we need to look at all the policies that have already been approved by past advisory committees, and actually have another vote on those. And if we need to take and change them, but to take and get them on the website so that they're available to everybody to see what policies that we have as a committee. They don't necessarily have to be in line with the Board of Selectmen. And one of the things that, in talking about the Board of Selectmen, this is the only community that I know of that the Board of Selectmen is the only one that approved the financial policy. Other communities actually have the finance or advisory committee actually sign off on it with a review. So that's just something that we need to work on better as a community to get some of these things better in tune. And that's my speech for this evening, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure I could go on for a long time, but I don't want to.
How you could.
Thank you, Will. So my comments for this evening are, first of all, to thank Will for the background information today on the Emergency Reserve Fund. That was very well taken and appreciated. In 2 weeks, we're going to hold our reorganization meeting for fiscal year 2022. At that time, we will hopefully have 7 members. I got my fingers crossed. And at the same time, we will be appointing chairman, vice chairman, or excuse me, I'm going to say that again. Chairperson, vice chairperson, and scribe for fiscal year 2022, as well as standing committee members for fiscal year 2022. Will, I'll give you a call tomorrow. I want to make sure that you have some things that you need to hand over so that I can get them on the agenda for the meeting in 2 weeks. These are bills that are going to need to be paid, so we'll go through those. But I want to concentrate next week on the reorganization, and then any final things that we have to do in order to close out fiscal year 2021 on the best note that we can as an advisory committee.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Will.
I'll have that documentation. And one of the things that I was going to end up saying also is that we don't know the status of some of the bills
Mhm.
that we have because the mail was picked up and it goes all the way back to the January, February timeframe, and there was on it was second notice as far as the bill. So we're waiting for information from the accountant or through the administrator to get that information so we can clarify for our books and get stuff squared away.
And as soon as we have that information, as I'll be putting on the agenda what we actually have to pay so that we can get that taken care of by the end of the fiscal year. Other than that, I want to thank all of you for a very good and lively discussion this evening, and I'm looking forward to the reorganization meeting in 2 weeks. And at this time, if there's no other discussion, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn tonight's meeting. Is there any discussion on said motion?
Nope.
Hearing none, we go to a roll call vote. Bob?
Yes.
Will?
Yes.
April?
Yes.
Faith?
Yes.
Bev?
Yes.
And I am a yes. This meeting is adjourned as of 7:26 p.m. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you very much.
All right, you too.
Thank